In this video, you'll see me turn this old, worn-out tabletop that almost got thrown away into beautifully framed wall art. If you're in the business of selling products and are having trouble finding your next commission or sale, it's always good practice to check in with past clients, not only to see how they're doing with the piece you've already sold them, but to see if they might be in need of something else. And if they like your work, oftentimes, their need might even come up during a delivery and installation. This was the case of a client of mine in Scottsdale, Arizona. I had made them this table here, my largest round epoxy table to date, and during delivery, the client mentioned she had another job for me. She showed me an old dining table that was being stored outside at the side of the house. She really had no need for a second dining table or even the space to store it, but she couldn't throw it away because her mother had hand-painted the flower designs on top. She asked me if I could transform the table into something else. My initial thoughts were to build a cabinet and use the tabletop as doors, or maybe even an entryway bench. But because the client didn't want any more furniture, we decided to turn this old, worn-out table into wall art. The first steps were to determine how much of the old tabletop I could use. It had a leaf extension, so I needed to remove all the hardware and bracing underneath, and then also cut off all of the trim on the edges. Once that was done, I was left with a nice flat piece, and I can now move on to building the frame. We also decided on only using 2 panels instead of the 3. The client really likes dark wood to go with the rest of their furniture, so we opted to use black walnut.
Okay, a couple things before I go ahead and glue up this miter. So I got my biscuit slots there. That's the biscuit. That's going to help keep my tops flush and aligned. But miters are kind of hard to clamp because of this 45-degree angle. Now, when I made those cuts using the chop saw, I was left with a bunch of these cutoffs. And so I actually glued the cutoff to the outer portion of this frame using some CA glue. So the CA glue is not permanent. I'll be able to hit that off with a hammer and there will be no damage to the outside of this. But what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to get a clamp around it now. So I did it on both sides. And it's allowed me to get a clamp so I could provide good clamping pressure to this middle section here. And then once that's all dried and glued, I can knock these off, sand the outside, and we'll have a nice, tight miter. Oh, so before sanding, I forgot I wanted to add some splines to this. So I just used my biscuit joiner here, lined that up on the corner, made sure my top mark was lined up, and then cut a slot. And then I had all this this thin piece of scrap from my last project. So I cut up a bunch of these little guys, and I'm going to add this in there. That one's a little loose. That was a little too tight, but you get the idea. I'm going to add this spline, flush trim that, cut that off, and that's going to add some strength to this miter joint while giving a cool little oak contrast against the wood. I think that's going to look really nice.
The finish on the table was pretty worn, so I lightly sanded it down and gave it a few coats of a clear satin finish. For the finish on the frames, I went with my favorite finish, Rubio Monocoat Oil plus 2C in their black pigment, 2 coats. This not only darkened up the walnut just a touch, but walnut tends to lighten to a honey brown color over time, so this will help mitigate that. Okay. There's that. Good. To attach the tabletop to the frames, I tried out Total Boat Thixo for the first time. It's a 2-part epoxy that comes in a convenient cartridge, where the tip of the cartridge is specially designed to mix the 2 components together before it gets applied. Super easy to use, and I highly recommend. For hardware, I picked up some aluminum French cleat material. This material is really easy to use and you get to cut it to whatever size you want. The edges were a little sharp, so I cleaned them up with a small file. The client wasn't sure if they wanted to hang them vertically or horizontally, so I drilled holes to give them both options. I really liked how this project came out and was super happy that I got to preserve a family heirloom by transforming it into something that made more sense for the client's needs. So again, it's always good practice to check in with past clients and how they're doing with the piece you've already sold them, or have a conversation during a delivery to see if your current client is in need of something else, because your next sale might be closer than you think. Until next time, thanks for watching.